The global elite's psychotic new plan exposed right here today. And I would advise watching this video all the way to the end because I can guarantee you Klaus and Ursula and all their buddies at Davos will not like this video one bit. So you don't know how long it's actually going to stay up on YouTube. I'm going to explain this to you in one simple, fast step. Step number one, let's go over everyone's favorite group of bureaucrats, the United Nations, the Fed, and how if they implement this plan, it will lead, most likely, to an economic collapse. And for those of you who are watching this video and saying, yeah, George, okay, psychotic, that might be using a little bit of hyperbole. Just wait till the end of this video and you'll understand that if anything, I'm understating it with the title. So let's introduce a new Bond villain. We've already got Klaus and Ursula. Now we've got Rebecca. And I want you to notice Rebecca's last name, Greenspan. You're reading that correctly, G-R-Y-N-S-P-A-N. Is she related to the infamous central banker right here in the U.S., Alan Greenspan, who's pretty much the father of central bank intervention, which is one of the main reasons we have so many asset bubbles today? I don't know. I doubt it based on her accent. You'll see that in a clip in just one moment. But her ideas are just as bad. So here she is holding a sign saying, I love Davos, and she is representing the United Nations. So what she has done over the last couple days has put out a message. She's put out an alert to all the central bankers, including Jerome Powell, saying that you guys need to stop raising interest rates. You don't know what you're doing. You're going to create a global economic recession. Her words, not mine. But we have to remember that Powell wants to crush inflation here in the United States. He doesn't want to be remembered as Arthur Burns. Oh no. He wants to be remembered as Paul Volcker, which is why he's holding a sign saying, I love Paul Volcker. But he's saying, Rebecca, you don't know what you're talking about. I have to continue raising interest rates because you got to look at the Phillips curve. So a lot of the academics, the PhDs and the mainstream economists believe this Phillips curve is so precise and so accurate that it's kind of a playbook for battling inflation. And it's very straightforward. The bottom line represents the unemployment rate. The top line, or the side line here, the vertical line, represents the inflation rate. So the way the Phillips curve works is as the unemployment rate goes down, the inflation rate goes up. So said another way, the only way that you can tackle inflation is if you bring the unemployment rate up. The unemployment rate has to get higher. That's how you tame inflation. And this is why recently you've heard Jerome Powell come out and take a very hawkish stance, saying that unemployment might have to go higher. It might have to go from 3.5 to 3.7, maybe up to 4.5. And of course, he's understating it. But he also says that the economy might have to go through significant pain. Again, his words, not mine. So Powell is most likely really going to push back against Rebecca. But if they can get all of the central bankers and the Davos types coordinated, they might be able to put enough pressure on Jerome Powell. But Rebecca's argument is pretty straightforward. She's saying, Jerome, stop raising rates because what you're doing is you're making the dollar go higher and higher and higher. You're making the dollar appreciate against all of these global currencies, and that's crushing emerging markets and developing markets. Countries like Colombia, where I am right now. She's saying if you continue to raise interest rates, so we've got the United States right here, let's say rates are Fed funds at 3%. She's saying this is going to increase the value or continue to increase the value of the dollar relative to other currencies. So what's going to happen is you're going to create a global recession. This means that there's going to be fewer dollars going into Colombia And I'm just using the United Nations as a proxy for all the countries that are buying goods from Colombia. So if we have a global recession, they're going to buy fewer goods. If they're buying fewer goods, that means fewer dollars going into Colombia. Well, they've got a lot of dollar-denominated debt, as you guys know from watching my videos, and it's pretty much my good buddy Brent Johnson's dollar milkshake theory. They don't have enough dollars circulating in the global economy. Velocity goes down because economic output is decreasing. So Colombian corporations have to take pesos off their balance sheet, buy dollars to service their debt, and also buy the inputs for things that they need to consume here in Colombia, such as grain. Colombia grows a lot of fruits, a lot of vegetables, but in order to get that protein their society needs, they need to import a lot of grain from, let's say, the United States. That's going to have to be settled in dollars. So if they don't have enough dollars coming in, then they have to sell pesos to buy dollars, which creates a further imbalance in the FX market, which exaggerates the interest rate differential that Rebecca complained about in the first place. Now, what's odd about her complaint, initially stemming from the interest rate differential, is the United States actually has lower interest rates than most of the countries she's referring to. Let's take Colombia. Their interest rates right now, their overnight rate is at 10%. So how can you argue that it's all about the interest rate differential and that's why the dollar is going higher? Therefore, if Jerome Powell stopped raising interest rates, somehow the dollar would go lower. Maybe, maybe not. But going back to the supply-demand imbalance in the FX market, basically what's happening is there are all these pesos being sold. This increases the supply of pesos, increases demand of dollars. What happens to peso, the value? It goes down relative to the dollar, and the dollar appreciates against all these other fiat currencies, which makes the problem worse. So what she points out, and kind of accurately, I'll give her credit here, is this creates a lot of inflation in these emerging markets and developing markets, such as Colombia, even more so than you're seeing right now in the West. So this prompts the local central banks, I'm saying the local Colombian central bank, to continue to raise rates higher and higher and higher. This puts downward pressure on the economy. This affects the poor and middle class disproportionately. Therefore, this could lead to social unrest. Now, this part of what she says is correct. The next part is wrong. She says you have to look at it from their standpoint. They've had to deal with the cerveza sickness. They've had to deal with all the fallout from Russia invading Ukraine. Therefore, they have to deal with these rate increases because of the inflation. They're going to go out to the streets with the torches and pitchforks, and this isn't good for anybody. But what she fails to acknowledge is the heavy price they're having to pay isn't a result of the cerveza sickness. Absolutely not. It's a result of the policies pushed on them from the global elite, the politicians, and the central planners. Also, with Russia, well, is Russia invading Ukraine the real problem? Or is it the sanctions that were imposed on Russia that are completely backfiring and making matters far worse for pretty much every country other than Russia? And therefore, we can say that the rate increases and the inflation that's decimating the poor and middle class, not just in the West, but even more so in these developing economies, is a result of the central planners themselves. People like Klaus, Ursula, and definitely Rebecca Greenspan. So after Powell shows Rebecca the Phillips curve and says, no, I've got to smash inflation here in the United States, and this is the only way I can do it, she says, oh, Jerome, I've already thought about a solution for this. And now we're getting to the psychotic part of the video. So she says, I know that you've got to tackle inflation domestically, but you don't have to do it by raising interest rates. No. You need to do it by some supply side economics. You need to do it by some other kind of crafty measures that only the global elite, the Davos types, are smart enough to even know about. But right now, I'll let you in on the little secret. And this is Rebecca talking to Jerome Powell through this letter. So let's get it from Rebecca in her own words. Editor, let's cut to the clip.
If we only use interest rates, we have to really bring that instrument to the limit. And there is no way to do that without causing a recession. But if we go also for the supply side, if we go also for the market concentration markups, if we go for the speculative issues and we regulate that part, then we will be able to have a policy mix that won't push the world into a deep recession that we don't know how deep, how long, and how global it could be.
You'll notice she was overly broad and general in this interview. She didn't give any specifics. Why? Because she knew if she did, everyone watching would say that she was bat stuff crazy and that this isn't a serious proposal at all. So what we have to do is take a look at what Rebecca actually wrote in her letter to all of the central bankers. Editor, go ahead and pull up the letter. So the supply side economics she's referring to is actually increasing taxes, a windfall profit tax for those greedy corporations that are actually producing all the energy we need. And then, of course, she, like always, blames it on the speculators. We have to smash the speculators because they're the only reason we see global inflation skyrocketing right now. And then she concludes with the most psychotic assertion I have ever seen by someone that claims to know economics, especially when they're arguing for supply side economics. In other words, increasing the supply of goods and services. She says that we need to have strategic price controls. That's right. So what she's arguing is let's not battle inflation by increasing interest rates. Let's go ahead and keep interest rates artificially low, but to squash prices, we'll go ahead and increase taxes, we'll go after the speculators, and we will incorporate price controls that we know worked so well in the 1970s. And you guys know from watching my videos that price controls don't increase the amount of stuff, they reduce the amount of goods and services created. They always create shortages. So let's think this through. If this plan is enacted, let's say that she is able to put enough pressure on Powell using the pull from the EU and Ursula, or maybe the World Economic Forum and the IMF from Klaus. If he implements this, or maybe if other central bankers implement this type of policy, then we are going to see an economic collapse. There are no certainties, only probabilities. But I can tell you that the probability is extremely high that this leads to some sort of crisis. Why? Because if you artificially prevent prices from going up, sure, short term, prices might stabilize. But eventually, you're going to have to lift the price controls. And when you do, consumer price inflation explodes higher. As an example, let's look at the 1940s. Editor, throw up the chart. And you'll remember prior to 1947, we had price controls in the United States. And when they were lifted, inflation skyrocketed to 19.5%. Okay, well, let's look at that through the lens of what just happened in the UK. They had a pension crisis because the long end of their yield curve with their government bonds, the gilts, exploded higher. The yields went higher. This means the price went down. This created a margin call for a lot of the pension funds that almost blew up the entire system. The Bank of England had to come in and go from doing quantitative tightening to emergency quantitative easing. So just imagine for a moment what would happen right here in the United States if we had inflation at 19.5%. What would the interest rate be on the 10-year Treasury, the 30-year Treasury? And what would that do to our pension funds right here in the good old US of A? And it's not just the pension funds. Just think what that would do to the housing market, the stock market, and therefore the domestic economy. To say that this would be an economic crisis or collapse is an understatement. And it's just like every single one of the central planner's policies. The unintended consequences always make things much, much worse, to the degree to which you have to ask the question, are these unintended consequences? Or like we said on our video the other day, are they intended consequences? Are Klaus, Ursula, and Rebecca just naive? Or is this all part of their Machiavellian plan to reduce population growth and reduce energy consumption, therefore the standard of living across all of Europe and the United States? For more content that'll help you build wealth and thrive in a world of out-of-control central banks and big governments, check out this playlist right here, and I will see you on the next video.